Hello and welcome to the Unusual Stories podcast. My name is Wojciech Salski and I'll be your host for today, as per usual. So, first and foremost, thank you very much for tuning in and listening or watching, anything in between. I hope that you're going to enjoy this episode. This is going to be the 5th episode of our season of book reviews. And today we will talk about Dopamine Nation by Anna Lembke. The subtitle for that book is Finding Balance in the Age of Indulgence. And so I will talk about the book for a bit. I will talk about some of my thoughts about the book and also give you a little bit of a background of how did I encounter that book in the first place. And also, I just wanted to let you know before we start that if you feel like you would like to support the podcast, whether by clicking to subscribe, giving a like, sending it to a friend, or supporting us in a way of financial donation, feel free to follow the link below. And of course, thank you very much for all of those who do. And I hope that you'll enjoy the show. So today, I would like to talk with you about the Dopamine Nation, which is a book that Anna Lembke wrote, I believe a while ago, a few years ago, that I've encountered quite frankly by accident. So it sort of popped up for me, maybe not an accident considering all the algorithms, but it did pop up for me on my Audible at some point, and I sort of looked at it. I was like, oh, that's interesting, dopamine. I'm interested in that topic in general. Although I did already overcome my major struggles with addiction, such as cigarettes and weed, which I'll talk about in a moment. I did encounter it and I sort of put it on my list in books to read, right? So that list is obviously too long to be consumed, and I left it there for quite some time. And then I believe it was earlier this year, I did mention this book to two of my friends, my colleagues, that I meet weekly with, sort of to discuss things and support one another. And we came up with an idea of just reading books together and discussing them as well, as a benefit of exchanging ideas about those books. And both of them were quite interested in that particular book. So each of us gave 3 ideas to choose from. And then because the other books seemed a bit bigger and a bit more on a let's say theoretical side, they were quite interested in exploring this one first. And because I did not read it as well, it was a good idea to read it together. It was an additional benefit of sharing that experience. So we did. And maybe this is a coincidence, maybe not. I believe there is not really that many coincidences in the world, but of course feel free to think different. One of them actually did quit smoking cigarettes and weed soon after the book we've read. So it's interesting. I remember we were discussing our challenges and our sort of things that we would like to change in our lives. And one of the things that this friend of mine came up with was that he would like to quit smoking again because he did not smoke for a while. And then after some unnecessary talk here and there, he fell back into this habit, which is obviously, fair enough. If you like to smoke, feel free to do so. No one can tell you otherwise. But it's not necessarily the healthiest of habits, and it definitely isn't the healthiest for someone who already quit and came back, because there's also, I believe, a lot of guilt and remorse around this sort of dynamic of coming back. So he was quite down about this all, and we pushed him to try and quit. He tried some alternatives, but it didn't seem to work too much. And of course, there is the book by Alan Carr, Easy Way to Quit Smoking, which I believe I've read definitely like 3 times already. And each of the times that I've quit before, long term, I did quit following that book. I did also use a podcast, Quit Smoking With Me, which was really interesting as an additional support for my experience for the first 30 days. And so basically, Alan Carr was there. I believe my friend also did read that book. But upon reading Dopamine Nation and sort of exchanging thoughts about it together, it cemented some of those ideas for him to try again and quit cold turkey. And this is a key word here. And I do believe it works because it worked for me. It worked for my friends and other people that I know. So if you would like to quit smoking, I would definitely recommend, reading this book, Dopamine Nation, as well as Quit Smoking, Easy Way to Quit Smoking by Alan Carr. I'll put both of those books links in the description below. Anyway, here we are, we read it together, we discussed it. My friend now is clean off both weed and cigarettes for, I believe, all over 2 months or maybe 3. I'm definitely clean of cigarettes for the past 8 months. No, 9, 10 even. 9.5. So that's a great success from my end, especially that when I was in Kuwait, I fell back into smoking quite hard. And I do not smoke weed as well. I've quit. I've struggled with more cigarettes than weed, but both of them were a big vice for me for quite some time when I was a teenager and sort of an adolescent. And then at uni, we also smoked loads with my friends. Maybe I didn't smoke as much as them because I worked more, but for the most part, I did indulge in it, and it was not necessarily for the benefit of myself. So one of the big things that changed for me during the pandemic, as well as I started writing and creating the podcast that you're listening to right now, was that I also recognized that I have a problem with weed in particular. I did have a few incidents that I felt like, a sort of psychotic feeling because of all the smoking, and so I scared myself and stopped. And every now and then I would smoke back again, and I would feel bad, and I would just think, why did I smoke in the first place? And at this point, I'm just clean. I mean, I'm not saying no in the future. Maybe I will smoke an odd doobie here and there with someone just as a part of a party or whatever, but I tend not to do it. I don't remember the last time I did it, and I don't plan doing it in the future. Anyway, enough about me, enough about my vices. Let's jump into the book. So the Dopamine Nation by Anna Lembke is a sort of a guide with a big piece of background theory and sort of understanding, letting the reader understand how dopamine works and how our reward-based system in the brain provokes us to make choices that are not necessarily the best for us in the long term. So this is the example of sugar, cigarettes, overindulgence in anything really. Basically, the first part of the book is about understanding the pleasure-pain system, which promotes reward-based activity. So a dopamine is one of the neurotransmitters, and it creates pleasure feeling for motivation and rewarding. So this is what drives us to do things, what keeps us going. If you look back into the sort of history of ourselves, of our species, and this, I believe, is very similar to other animals, just maybe not as deeply understood as ourselves, that, for example, imagine that you're going through the plains, you need to hunt something or find some food to eat because otherwise you will starve. And if it wasn't for dopamine, by the time you're very exhausted and you see that rabbit or that piece of fruit that you'd like to eat, but obviously you will have to exert some effort to get it, you would stop. Without dopamine, you would not have enough motivation to pull you through that final moments. Dopamine in a sense is like this hopeful feeling of the reward coming towards us. It's like a pleasure sensation in spite of the pain. So you can push through that final sprint, you can push through that final fight that you're having, you can push through that final whatever sport or achievement you're trying to complete, because dopamine is driving your experience, promising you to be a pleasurable sensation in the long run. And the funny paradox and ironic paradox about it all is that actually, when they measured the sensations of reward-based systems, sort of achievement, pleasure, among people like athletes and people that achieve success, the highest peak is just before the success is achieved. And then the moment it is achieved, it starts going down, which is why we crave the next thing. You know, this is why if you are expecting your life to suddenly be so much better once you have that thing, or once you become that someone, you're probably in for a big surprise, because by the time you get there, your system will be already recognizing some next hill to take, which is, I guess, what drives progress in life. And maybe recognizing that can give you also an insight into how to enjoy yourself more as you go, rather than just waiting for that one moment, one day, one thing that will make everything great. Because actually, as studies suggest, you're much more likely to enjoy the process, not the destination, or at least longer the process. So the interesting point that Ms. Lembke makes in the first part of the book is that extreme pleasure has to be counterbalanced with extreme pain. It's like a scale that has to be tipped back to where it was. So why is it important? The thing is, imagine it, there is a balance, there is a certain balance of hormones, there is a certain balance of emotional, homeopathy inside your brain. And up until that scale is sort of leveled, that's okay. It's, there is enough pain and enough pleasure to keep you balanced. The problem is, a moment we overindulge in pleasure, we're tipping the scale further down on one side. And this, in nature, through our balancing act of our brain and our hormones, this will have to be balanced again. The paradox here is that the more you tip it out of balance one way, the more it will have to be tipped out of balance the other way to become balanced. So it's not actually that you become so happy that you tip it all the way right here, and then you come back to your normal usual state. Instead, from here, your hormonal system will have to balance it all the way up here. So the pain is much stronger than the pleasure, because it has to balance it out. And this might be counterintuitive at first. I know it was for me, but understanding this, you know that you recognize that there is a price to pay in the long term for what you experience in the short term. It's like with anything in life, this is such a basic thing to recognize. If you indulge in sweets today and you don't move, in a few years' time, if you continue down that pathway, you'll probably not be able to move as well as you would if you didn't overindulge and stay on the couch. Which, it's easier said than done. Of course, we all have our troubles and we overindulge in things. Then some of those things we literally don't even recognize that we do, because they become our habits, about which I will talk in a moment. But it's important to note that if you are experiencing extreme pleasure, whether it is from a drug, from some sort of sensation, from some sort of activity, you should expect that at some point in the near future, you will have to pay that back by experiencing pain. And this does not have to be physical pain. This can be also psychological pain. So, for example, if we come back to the idea of achievement, by experiencing really high dose of achievement based pleasure, you're likely to experience a feeling of sort of nothingness and waste a few days later. I know that I think I talked about this in a podcast already. That's what happened when I self-published my book. So 2 years ago, I self-published my first book. I hope to self-publish the second book soon, probably as a next year April kind of vibe. Anyway, I remember that I expected this self-publishing experience, this experience of getting the book out there, getting the book out for people to see and read as a great, great experience, very high. And it was very, very high for the first day. Like I felt elated, that I've achieved something, I've made something for myself. I can say that I'm an author. And then the next day, I felt bad. I felt like kind of not really knowing what I'm supposed to do with my life now, asking myself whether or not that was even worth it, and longing for this uncertainty of how it would be to do it, which cannot be there because I've already done it, and I bet you've experienced that as well. This is also what over a long time might be the killer of your relationship or the killer of your passion for things. If you achieve success too easily, if it becomes overindulging very quickly, you're more likely to fall into this pit of this is not what I need, this is not what I want, this is unnecessary, or if we get something too easily, we tend to discount its value, which is why it's so important, I think, to recognize what you have and be grateful, because otherwise over time you take things for granted and you don't even remember how much you valued them when you got it. So this is something just to pay in mind. And maybe one of the challenges for this week for now is you can stop this video and ask yourself, are there any things that I'm overindulging in or with over my day that might be causing me some extreme pleasure, which brings extreme pain later on? And you can recognize that by recognizing whether or not you lack something, you feel lack or longing when you don't have that. So for example, an easy way to portray it is if you're a smoker, you know how it feels not to smoke. It's awful. When I was really, really intensely sort of addicted to cigarettes, I would smoke a cigarette, and only in those first few tokes from a cigarette, I would feel the alleviation of that pressure of smoking a cigarette. A moment later, the cigarette would be extinguished and I would be already subconsciously craving the next one. That's just how this wretched habit works. It's awful. If you've experienced that, you know what I mean. So yeah, just have a thought, whether or not there is something that you're indulging in so much that you might be actually lacking it when you don't. And that's probably an indicator that you're addicted to that thing one way or another. Similarly to a phone as well, but we'll get to that. Okay, so another point important to make before I go into the final thoughts and sort of ideas how you can take it forward and practically improve your situation is that tolerance to stimuli tends to make it tends to rise and make it harder to get high again. So this is something yet again that you're definitely able to relate to if you've ever been addicted to cigarettes, to weed, to sex, to anything really, to phone. which you probably are. I probably am as well, which is a sad part, and I'll talk about that more in a moment. But basically, tolerance rises, and with tolerance rising, you will need more to get the same amount of experiencing in. So this is very visible if you've ever done any sort of drugs, that the moment you've taken the first dose, and this is literally the first time you're doing it, similar to cigarettes, you will feel ecstatic from that, because it's something new. It's a new dose in your system. But by the time you've done it a few times, you will have to take more to experience a similar extent of high that you would do the time before. This is not easy, it's one of those troubling facets of it all, that if you're craving more of something that you've taken, you're probably indulging in something that is just addictive. Because in a normal situation, normal in air quotes being the situation when something is positively impacting your life, there is a certain threshold that is surely not gonna go overboard too easily, whether it's spending time with your loved ones, enjoying some activity. Sports is a great example. But if you do it so intensely that it becomes a craving for more, it probably means that you're addicted to it, and you're becoming more and more addictive as you go. So a tolerance here is a big factor that Ms. Lembke points out as one of the drawbacks from it all, and which is why she also points out that maybe the best thing to go about from time to time is to give yourself a fasting period, and we'll get to that right now. So the second part of the book is much more practical focused. It gives us some examples from case studies and from stories from Ms. Lembke's practice as a psychiatrist, I believe, and basically shows us a way of how we can become less entangled in this dopamine-driven problem, which basically is, the point of the book. It's the idea of finding balance in the age of indulgence. So Ms. Lembke points out that in our day and age, especially in the Western sphere of the world, and it's harder for me to talk about the Asian countries, for example, because I've not visited many. But in terms of Europe, for example, or United States, because it's very similar, we have plenty of pleasure opportunities, and we're increasingly decreasing the amount of pain stimuli, which it makes sense. Look at ourselves now versus ourselves from 300 years ago. We're much less prone to sustain damage in both terms of physical and mental agility. We have plenty of supporting drugs that can make us feel better, less sad, more happy, less tired, more sleepy, anything. So, we're sort of, especially with the medicine, the contemporary medicine, we're seemingly trying to just affect our system instead of powering through what the system gives us and experience it. And we're running away from pain, bringing more and more pleasure options. All the consumption, all the things that you eat out, all the things that you buy, all the things that you enjoy, they all have some part of pleasure piece within them. And the thing is, now more than ever, there is an opportunity for pleasure in all kinds and overindulgence in many forms, including phones. And this is where I'm gonna right now stop for a moment and just make you realize, which I think we've already talked about that before. Phone, the way that is made, the way that the system is made, with all the notifications and all the pings and calls and picking them up, and the sliding, the unlocking, All of those things are a part of a system that is created to make it easy for us and very intuitive to use. It is also by now one of the things that is pretty much in our arm's reach 24/7. I don't remember exactly what the studies were, so I'm not going to provide you here, but I've read an article about the fact that an outstanding amount of people, an outstanding number of people aged over 18 have their phone by their arm's length 24/7. And if you think about it, you're probably one of them as well. I know that at the furthest, I keep my phone sometimes in the same room while I'll do other stuff, and I'll just keep it there. But I do have a habit of picking up the phone just to go to the next room. And, fair enough. You probably work from your phone. You probably contact with your loved ones. You probably even have some things on your phone that are supporting your day-to-day life. But for the most part, it is also a huge, huge, huge addiction, especially if you use any social media, especially if you use anything that is affecting your mood. And quite frankly, there is little on the phone to do that wouldn't affect your mood. So an idea here to ponder is just how much am I affected by the phone in terms of my, ability to cope with reality and in terms of my dependence upon it. Anyway, with all this overabundance of pleasure and too little pain activity, or too little pain acceptance, I think is a good word. Ms. Lembke points two things that we can do to support ourselves in this dopamine fasting state. First of all, we need to reduce the overindulgence. We need to reduce pleasure, and we need to focus more on experiencing what is rather than craving and chasing what could be and would be. Secondly, we need to embrace pain more. And it may sound easy to begin with, it may sound hard, but it is what it is. It's just a mere acceptance and approach of recognizing what things we're probably overindulging ourselves with, what could be done to support a healthier, more balanced approach to those experiences, and encouraging ourselves to be vulnerable, truthful, and self-reflective regarding these ideas. So to kickstart your fasting, to kickstart your dopamine fast, and maybe overcoming some of your vices and addictions, Ms. Lembke points out that you should just quit the thing for a month. And it's not less than a month, because a month is enough for both the physiological sort of factors to diminish, as well as to give you enough time to stop thinking about those things every day on your psychological front. So, even though some people may say that you only need 28 days to quit smoking, or you only need 21 days to do something, or to change a habit, you only need 11 days, whatever, 60, it does not matter. I mean, I think, in my opinion, if you want to quit something, you should just quit it and then see how many days it's going to take you to stop thinking about it. But, in Miss Lembke's situation, in her stories, 1 month is enough to make you realize whether or not you want to quit it. So this is what my friend did, funnily enough, about smoking. We did read the book, and then he decided to quit for a month. And at the very beginning, when we said like, wow, that's great, then after a month you'll be free, he was very inclined to say like, nah, I'm pretty sure I'm going to come back, after a month, I'll finally have my reward, I'll finally have, this is the use of dopamine for that further success, let's say, state, right? Like at some point I will be able to enjoy myself because I've gone through this trouble. The thing is, though, he went for a month, and he did another month. He said that he feels like he's still addicted, which is why he wants to do another month, which is a paradox because, in the first place, he wanted to give himself an award for doing a month, which suggested he was addicted and he was not really leaving the addiction behind. And then after a month, because he still recognized that he's addicted, he gave himself another month. And at this point, I think it's been 2 or 3 or 4 months even. And he's done. I mean, I'm pretty sure he is until he smokes or he picks up that joint again, This is the whole idea of quitting. If you quit, then you need to keep being on the quit side, right? But yeah, the first indicator here is give yourself a month, and throughout that month, refrain from any indulgence in this particular substance. If you can, don't change it for anything similar, which is important because, for example, this is what Easy Way to Quit Smoking with Alan Carr suggests, is that if you use any chewing gums or patches, nicotine patches or whatnot, instead of cigarettes, you're not actually quitting, you're just quitting this habit and changing it for another. But ultimately, it's basically the very same substance that you're getting into your system, just a different way. So instead, quitting cold turkey means you will have a chance to look how you feel as you've quit and are quitting, which is an important part about the embracing pain part, about becoming truthful with yourself and about recognizing how, becoming mindful, how you are reacting to this situation. How are you feeling with this process? How are you feeling about those things that you're overindulgent with, but now you're refraining yourself from? So this is the main idea of the book, I think, and it is definitely something worth reading for, because we are certainly overindulging in many ways in our day and age. And I know that even though I've quit smoking and cigarettes, and I've refrained from coffee and alcohol as much as I can over my weeks, for example, I am still feeling a lot of different states of overindulgence from time to time, and it's an ongoing struggle. It's an effort. It's embracing the pain and refraining from too much, from the excess of pleasure, and seeing where that takes us. So yeah, a great quote here that I wanted to read for you, which reminded me of the book by Jordan Peterson, and about the idea of tell the truth, or at least don't lie, is truth telling engenders a plenty mindset. Lying engenders a scarcity mindset. Truth telling engenders a plenty mindset, and lying engenders a scarcity mindset. So, something to think about as well. So yeah, as I said, the challenge for this week, and maybe the final challenge for this book, apart from obviously reading it, and if you are addicted to anything and you would like to quit, feel free to check it out, as well as the Quit Smoking with Alan Carr. I believe Alan Carr also has a few different books about quitting other things, like quitting drinking. The challenge for this week for you is to stop and consider, is there anything in my life, is there anything in my daily activity that is not serving me and that I'm overindulging in? Is there anything that I crave too much? Is there anything that causes me a lot of emotional turmoil? And examples here that you can experiment with is social media, your phone, watching news, overeating, overdrinking, smoking, overindulging in sex, taking drugs, sugar is a big one, caffeine. I don't know, you pick your poison. And And then consider whether or not you would like to give yourself this challenge of doing 1 month cold turkey, and see throughout this month, how do you feel? What are you experiencing? Get your friends and family on your side to support you in this, and see what happens. Maybe this is the beginning of the end of this overindulgent of yours. So, yeah, I hope this book helps, and it did help me. It did help my friend, and I just think it's a valuable book to explore, especially if you have someone struggling overindulging in any way. And there are very, very many ways of overindulging. So, as I said, you gotta pick your poison, and maybe you're willing to fight it. Other than that, have a wonderful week. I hope that you're gonna enjoy your challenge, and please feel free to send me an email or comment in the podcast telling me that you're gonna go on that challenge and maybe what you've picked. I'm very excited to hear about your progress, and if it helps, share it with a friend, borrow the book, lend it to a friend, do what you can to help another. I think that's a great philosophy idea for life. Have a wonderful week yet again. Stay happy, stay healthy, and I'll see you next time.